بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Alhamdulillah, this is part 16 of our series on the history of the blessed land of Palestine. Previously we spoke about the Umayyad Dynasty and their role in the ruling of the land of Palestine, and we spoke about how this land under the rule of the Umayyads flourished and prospered, and the main reason being that the Umayyads had chosen a capital for themselves as Damascus in the Levant, and Palestine, being in close proximity to this land, benefited from being close to the capital of the Umayyad Dynasty. And before that, the capital of the Muslims, of the Muslim rulers, was Al-Madinah up until the time of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And in 37 AH, he moved his capital from Al-Madinah to Kufa because of what was occurring in terms of political instability in that land, and so that he could keep an eye over the people and rule where most of his following was. Because Ali ibn Abi Talib's following was in Al-Iraq, and moving to Al-Iraq with the problems that were occurring between the Umayyads, between Muawiyah and Ali radiallahu anhu, or this before the what we can call the Umayyad Dynasty. Ali radiallahu anhu moved his capital to Kufa, to Al-Iraq, and Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, who was in Damascus, was the governor. When he ascended to the post of Khalif, he remained in that city and announced it as the capital of the Muslim world. Initially, what happened with the Umayyads, and I mentioned this history, is because the Umayyads now, their empire and their dynasty comes to an end. How did this occur? We need to go through a certain chronology of historical events that lead up to the fall of the Umayyad dynasty and help us understand how the Abbasids took power. And obviously this directly correlates to the history of Palestine, because Palestine is initially ruled by the Umayyads and thereafter by the Abbasids. The Umayyads began their rule with Muawiyah radiallahu anhu when Al-Hasan, the grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, surrendered his khilafah to Muawiyah. And he did this because he did not want to see bloodshed. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam had mentioned in a hadith that the son of his would join between two great parties, and he did so in the year 41 AH, where Muawiyah then took control of the Muslim Khalifate or the Caliphate, and Al-Hasan had denounced his claim, and that was in the year 41 AH, and it was known as Amul Jama'ah, the year of congregation, because before that two great battles happened, the Battle of Siffin and the Battle of Jamal, and he had a third battle ensued with Al-Hasan fighting Muawiyah, meaning all the Muslims of Al-Hijaz and Al-Iraq on the side of Al-Hasan, and the Muslims of Al-Sham on the side of Muawiyah. More bloodshed would have occurred, even worse than what had occurred before in Al-Siffin and the Battle of Al-Jamal. And as we know, Al-Hasan was in the right, and the same way Ali radiallahu anhu was in the right against Muawiyah. And Muawiyah, even though not being in the right, however, this does not directly infer any amount of, as I would say, importance based on our topic being the history of Palestine. So I don't want to delve into that issue, but we will just allude to it that Ali radiallahu anhu was in the right against Muawiyah, and so was Al-Hasan. And Muawiyah radiallahu anhu then ascended to the post of the Khalif, and he ruled over these lands. The achievements that occurred in that time is that Muawiyah radiallahu anhu in his time carried on sending forces against the Romans and protecting the Muslim lands, and he sent armies to Constantinople, to Istanbul. So the jihad was ongoing, and the Umayyads in their time saw expansion. The biggest expansion that the Muslims saw was in the time of Umar and then Uthman, and in the time of Ali, because of the rift and the fights that happened internally between Ali and Muawiyah, not much expansion happened. But in the time of Muawiyah, when things settled, expansion continued again, and lots of developments occurred in the land of Palestine and outside. In the land of Palestine, like we said, that Muawiyah radiallahu anhu extended the Qibli Masjid and changed the wooden foundations to concrete. Thereafter, there was the building of the Dome of the Rock, and we said that the Dome of the Rock was in fact the dome was coated with real gold. So the Umayyads really took care of this place, and it was a place revered by them. Jerusalem, Masjid al-Aqsa, they visited it a lot. Even the Sahaba came. Ibn Umar did Hajj from al-Masjid al-Aqsa. Before that, the Dome of the Change was built, and we mentioned certain reasons of why they say it was built. And after that, we mentioned certain cities which were developed and new cities which were built, like the city of Ramla, which was built in 97 AH under the leadership of Sulaiman ibn Abdul Malik, and in it was al-Masjid al-Abyad, and the waterways that thereafter were put into the city, flowing water in the city of Ramla. It was the biggest city in the area of Palestine. Actually, the waterways stretched for 15 kilometers and emptied out under the courtyard of the masjid, and thereafter emptied into 4 reservoirs which supplied water to the entire city. And Ramla, like we said, was close to the place where the Battle of Ajnadin that we mentioned previously occurred. The city of Lud, the city of Asqalan, Ashkelon, these cities were all developed and they were revamped. The city of Caesarea, which was a Roman city. And what the Umayyads done is that they adapted to Roman way, meaning they took any Roman technologies that remained and thereafter built upon them and advanced. So this can be mentioned in favor of the Umayyads. Other events that also can be mentioned as achievements of the Umayyads is that they paved roads, and the road from Damascus to Jerusalem was completely paved. The port cities were well equipped militarily. They advanced. They had advances in military in terms of the navy, which other caliphs did not have before, to the extent that the Umayyads had. And many cities, like we said, were developed. The minting of coin happened. Initially, Roman currency was used, but the Umayyads started minting their own coin, and the minting happened within the land of Palestine. So the minting of gold and silver began in this time, the time of the Umayyads. And the Umayyads also then declared the Arabic language as the official language of the Islamic Empire. So any land which had people which were non-Arab, and the land of Palestine at that time, because of Roman influence, they spoke Greek, most of them. This led to change now of language and culture, and to stability in the Muslim lands, because language and culture bring people together. In terms of progression, the peak of the Umayyad dynasty happened in the time of Hisham ibn Abdul Malik. And Hisham ibn Abdul Malik was from 105 to 125 AH, and we know the fall of the Umayyads happened in 132. Hisham ibn Abdul Malik, in terms of the peak, when I say the peak, I mean in terms of the stretch of the dynasty. He ruled from China, from the borders of China, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Iran, all of these lands, coming across Azerbaijan, into the Arabian Peninsula, into Iraq, into Najd, over into the Levant, all of these lands, Syria, Lebanon, parts of Turkey, Jordan, Palestine, and then into Africa, all of Egypt and parts of Sudan and Eritrea, Somalia, all of these areas, across into West Africa and right up until Mauritania, and also some parts of Africa which were like non-Arab Africa, meaning Black Africa, like countries like Senegal and parts of Senegal and Mali, and those countries which border Mauritania and Algeria. So he ruled over all this land, and then even into Spain, Portugal, up until the south of France. So the Umayyad dynasty stretched, and this empire stretched over a vast amount of land. And there were many achievements that one can mention. However, they are not directly connected to the land of Palestine, so we won't mention them in this lecture series, but inshallah we will be in the future doing a lecture series where we can mention about these dynasties and what they achieved. So this dynasty here stretched over all of that land. How did this now powerful dynasty, with all this technological advancement, controlling this large amount of land, highly populated, adaptations from the Roman technology and the Sassanids, the Persians, growing in terms of its renaissance, meaning in knowledge and power, in medicine, in every single field, how did this powerful dynasty come now to bow and to break, and then after be dissolved by the Abbasids? How did this happen? How this happened is that the Umayyads were different from those that preceded them. The Khulafa al-Rashidun, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali. Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali did not place into power any one of their relatives. The Umayyads used tribal links in their relatives and they use this to develop a network of leadership throughout the dynasty. And this helped them because they could trust everybody that was in leadership. Umar radiallahu anhu, Uthman, Ali, all of them never put people of their family because they were from the same tribe or seeing them as Arabs. Because of this, they were different. That's the first thing. So the Umayyads, initially it started off as putting family members, but later on it became an Arab, non-Arab issue. And the Muslim world was now not only made up of Arabs in the Arabian Peninsula and parts of the Levant and Iraq, but made up of more non-Arabs than Arabs. Imagine from China, India, the Indo-Pak region, all of Africa, these are non-Arabs. Spain. So the non-Arabs saw that the Umayyads had a certain favoritism and it became a race issue, and this led to a certain weakness in the areas which were not Arab. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the attention they gave to the region of Sham was not the same attention they gave to other regions. So that also led to people being disgruntled by the way the Umayyads handle things. However, this doesn't mean that the dynasty was in problems and people were starving. There was economic strife towards the end, and this is also why you can say that the Umayyads had fallen. The third issue is that during the time of the Umayyads, there was constant upheaval in Iraq from the time of Uthman, Ali. And here political ideas were born. The first doctrine that was born politically was a doctrine of Shiism. And I say this because Shiism in its beginning was a political doctrine and not a theological doctrine. And this happened because the people of Iraq were with Ali radiallahu anhu against Muawiyah, and thereafter with Al-Hassan against Muawiyah again, and Al-Hassan relinquished, and the people were irritated with Al-Hassan for or giving up power to Muawiyah. And it remained like that up until the time of Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu. And we know Al-Hussein thereafter was martyred in Karbala. And this now marks the beginning of theological Shiism, and where problems really start happening for the Umayyads, because all of Al-Hijaz and Al-Iraq do not show allegiance with Yazid. Muawiyah radiallahu anhu gave leadership to his son Yazid, and we know that many of the Sahaba disagreed with him. We know that Al-Hussein was better than Yazid. However, what occurred was Yazid sent Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad to Al-Kufa to call uprising against him. So when Muslim ibn Aqil was there, they killed him, the cousin of Al-Hussein. And when Hussein arrived, they killed him also in Karbala. And we know those who were responsible were Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad for giving the orders, and then Shimr ibn the notion, and also Anas ibn Sinan, and these were the ones that killed Hussein radiallahu anhu directly. But the main blame is on the people of Kufa, and I'm mentioning this because you will see how the Umayyads fell because of this. The people of Kufa who pledged allegiance, when Al-Hussein came, they betrayed him. None of them came out to fight. A large city like Kufa, and they betrayed him, and he was killed by the army that was sent by Yazid. Obviously, this army originally was sent towards Daylam, but Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, the governor, redirected it to Al-Hussein and his relatives, and Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu was martyred in this place. And Yazid, the blame also goes to him, because after finding out about this, he did not punish anybody, and there was no remorse shown for this affair. So because of this, the doctrine which was political Shiism, meaning those who supported Ali, Shia Ali or Shi'ani Ali, and Shi'ani Muawiyah, those who supported him in the Levant stayed with him, and those who supported Ali were from Al-Iraq and Al-Hijaz, they stayed with him. It was initially just political, but after the martyrdom of Al-Hussein, and the people of Kufa seeing that they had betrayed him, it became now a doctrine which became theological, and they started building upon this ideas, theological ideas, that leadership should be in the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam directly, meaning from Al-Hussein and his descendants. And what happened from here was that a rift occurred. So this is one of the big differences between the Khalifs or Khulafa al-Rashidun, the rightly guided Khalifs, and the Umayyads, because now in the time of Abu Bakr, Umar and Uthman, internally there was no rift. There was no doctrine that was theological, even in the time of Ali. But now in the Umayyad time, a new doctrine comes about, and there is a theological doctrine, the doctrine of Shiism. Another doctrine was also born, and its roots were planted early in the time of Uthman, but kept coming up and uprising in the time of the Umayyads, and that's the doctrine of the Khawarij, the ones who are known in English as the Kharijites, or those who are extremists. They, in fact, the Kharijites attempted to kill some of the Sahaba during the time of Ali radiallahu anhu. They attempted to kill Ali and Amr ibn al-As and Muawiyah. They succeeded. Abdurrahman ibn al-Muljim killed Ali radiallahu anhu, but the other two from the Kharijites who planned to kill Amr ibn al-As, the governor of Egypt, and Muawiyah, the governor of Sham, were Al-Barq ibn Abdullah al-Tamimi. He was sent to kill Muawiyah, and Amr ibn Bakr al-Tamimi was sent to kill Amr ibn al-As, but they both failed. And this shows that there was certain uprisings from the early days. However, Abdurrahman ibn Muljim did kill Ali radiallahu anhu, and that marked the end of the Khilafah of Ali, and that's where Al-Hasan took control. The first uprising, like we mentioned, was in the time of Muawiyah and Ali, and where these ideas started coming about. But doctrinal Shi'ism in terms of theology came about in the time of Yazid. How it came about is that after the martyrdom of Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu, the people of Kufa began now to see themselves as the ones who had caused this calamity in Karbala. And Karbala is a stone's throw away from Kufa. It's very close. So the people knew, the people of Kufa, it was right under their noses, right on their doorstep, where Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu where siege was being laid to him and his family, and where he was killed. So after his killing, armies came about, and this now fed into the injustices of the Umayyads, where they showed that there was injustice firstly with non-Arabs. There was injustice because they favored Damascus, their lands, and the Levant over Al-Iraq. And most of the scholars now in the Muslim world are not Arab anymore. There are lots of non-Arab scholars, but the Umayyads, because they favor Arabs, it also caused a problem. And the population of the non-Arabs now coming into the Arab lands started increasing, and they see this difference where Arabs are treated differently, their lands are looked after, and not Arabs per se, however, the people of the Levant moreover. So Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu is martyred, and thereafter armies start coming out in the following year known as Jaysh al-Tawwabin, and these are uprisings that caused instability. Jaysh al-Tawwabin is an army that came out of Kufa to seek tawbah, forgiveness for the act of betraying Al-Hussein in Karbala and not coming out. And when they passed this land of Karbala, they beat themselves. Until today we find this act within Shi'ism, where they beat themselves at Karbala because they understand that they are the ones who betrayed Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu. In the time of Yazid also, he allowed the killing in Medina. He sent the army to Al-Madinah. And this also caused people to be disgruntled. They say that over 1,000 women became pregnant from being raped in Al-Madinah. These are Muslims against Muslims. So there was upheaval in the Umayyad Dynasty. Abdurrahman ibn al-Ash'ath, or what they call Fitnat al-Qurra, also the trials of al-Qurra, where most of the scholars and the known people, even the Sahaba, were involved in this. Abdurrahman ibn al-Ash'ath was with Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad in Kufa and he was one of his men that came with him when Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu was killed, and he actually was the one who took Muslim ibn Aqil as a prisoner to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad in Kufa. He also thereafter rose up against the Umayyads, and it was quelled. But these are uprisings. The Umayyads also had other characteristics that caused them to be looked at in an eye of disfavor, is that they used Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, governors like Hajjaj, over the people. And these governors were known to be difficult. They were known to be oppressive and difficult. So there was oppression that was happening in these lands. However, the Umayyad dynasty after the Khulafa al-Rashidun is the best dynasty. The Abbasids were not better than them, nor were the Ottomans and those that came after them, the broken empires thereafter, meaning these countries that we see today. None of them are better in terms of leadership than the Umayyads. However, I mention this to show where the weaknesses came in. Thereafter, there was Thawrat al-Mukhtar al-Thaqafi, and he killed Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad and did to him what he did to Al-Hussein radiallahu anhu. This was in 67 AH. 65 AH was Thawrat al-Tawwabin or Jaysh al-Tawwabin, and there were many uprisings from those who now today are known as the Shias and from the Khawarij, and this caused instability. The Abbasids took this and they took advantage of the instability in Iraq and in the non-Arab lands, and they used it to their advantage. What did they do? Abu Muslim al-Khurasani was in Khurasan, attacked the Umayyad governor there and defeated him in battle, and he now in 742 announces Khurasan as a separate entity or under the Abbasid rule. Abu al-Abbas, who was the first leader of the Abbasids, came into Kufa in the year 742 privately, and they also began now working, and eventually they established Iraq as a land of the Abbasids, and a battle happened between the Umayyads and the Abbasids in Iraq, and this is the turning point. This was in 750. The battle at Nahr al-Zab happened, one of the straits of the Tigris River, and the Umayyads lost at this battle. The last Khalif of the Umayyads was Marwan ibn Muhammad, and he ran from Iraq then, running away from the Abbasids, and eventually he was killed in Egypt in a place known as Hilwan, which is current day Cairo, which is in Cairo currently. So this battle happened, and this place was between Mosul and Erbil. Other battles also happened in the Levant and Egypt, which led to the fall, and this battle that led to the eventual fall of the Umayyads totally was in Egypt, and it was the battle of Busir. When Egypt fell, all the other lands then opened up for the Abbasids and surrendered. So the Abbasids took control in 750 from the Umayyads, and now they control the land of Palestine, which is the topic of our history. Now we need to understand something, that the Abbasids, their rule was over two periods. Their rule was over a period of strength and over a period of weakness. And this plays directly into our history of Palestine, because during the time of weakness, governors came in and ruled the land, even though it was under the Umayyad Dynasty as a name. However, there were different nations and governors and peoples ruling the land of Palestine, and different dynasties under the umbrella of the Abbasids, however, not directly under the control of the Abbasids. The first leg of the Abbasid dynasty lasted for 115 years, from the year 132 AH till the year 247 AH. And this is a time of strength, where we had the Khulafa like Abu Ja'far al-Mansur and Harun al-Rashid, and they were strong Khulafa, and they controlled, and they had also jihad against the Romans and those who surrounded the Muslim lands. They were in power, in control, and they had governors who listened to them, and they were ruling as they were. However, the second leg, and this comes in for somebody who looks at history, how do we now look at the Abbasids in their time as governors who drank and were opulent and who were only interested in slave girls, and at the same time, how were they protecting the Muslim lands? There is a second part of the Abbasid dynasty, and this is the time of weakness. There is a time, or the rule of weakness, and this was for 409 years, from the year 247 to 656. So the Abbasids ruled for 524 years. The first period, they ruled Palestine under their own rule, and we will speak about what occurred in that time. And the second period of their rule was something that was just by name, and that was the bulk of the rule for 409 years. However, certain things or certain events occurred in this time that led their own governors, and this is because now they favored non-Arabs over Arabs, opposite to the Umayyads, so that they would leave no doubt within their dynasty, began now to take control of the lands and disobey the Khalif or disregard him totally. Also, what led to their weakness, the Abbasids, and we'll discuss it, is the attacks from the Mongols and thereafter from the European kings. However, the Abbasids did rule the land of Palestine. They did not give it the same reverence and importance as the Umayyads, and that's because the Abbasids initially moved their capital from Damascus, or the capital was first established as Kufa, and then Baghdad, and eventually in the end Samarra became one of the capitals, and all of the capitals were in the land of Iraq, and this is where most of the importance was given. However, Palestine did not suffer in this time, but we will mention about the dynasties that ruled it in the second part of the Abbasid dynasty, or under the second reign of the Abbasid dynasty, in our next lecture. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.